One of the things that I've heard, I think you've mentioned it as well, is the middle income trap. That Chinese officials are terrified that they're not going to be able to achieve escape velocity, and they're going to get stuck in that sort of area between a developing and a developed economy.
Yeah.
And I think demographics are a big part of that. Their demographics are not great for a country that's still developing. That's at about 8,000. What is it? The average the income for an adult. Can you explain to us what that is and why they're so afraid of it?
Yeah, this is their vision of, after 40 years of fast-paced growth, all of a sudden, rather than naturally segueing from being a developing country and becoming an OECD nation, a rich nation, as the trajectory would suggest, instead they hit a wall, as almost every other developing country has, and they end up sort of mired in this permanent state of being a developing economy. So this idea was first drummed up by the World Bank. A few years ago, a batch of economists did a survey of, I think it was 101 countries that could be fairly interpreted or defined as being middle income in 1960. So middle income, they weren't rich nations, they weren't, poor nations, they were kind of, they were developing economies. And they found that by 2008, only 13 of those 101 had actually transitioned into being rich nations. And almost so many of the others had seemed to be on track, whether it be in Mexico or Argentina. There were periods where they were growing extremely aggressively. Malaysia, Thailand, the Asian tigers during, the late 1990s. And then they hit a crisis or some sort of other economic event, and they never made the transition, and that's what China worries about. And I think more than anything, that's kind of what, on the economic side of things, that's what keeps them up at night. And there are so many factors that could sort of feed into aggravating that, and one of them, as you said, is the population issue. There's been this long-held concern that China will become old before it becomes rich. And the more the population, working age population shrinks, the harder it is to become rich, because all of a sudden, you've got less people working, and you have to start redirecting resources towards an aging population. So I think one of sort of the underlying tensions of the trade conflict at the moment is that Beijing came up with a solution for sort of dealing with its middle income trap. And this was this recognition that it can't continue growing the economy as it is, which is driven by debt. So they need a new model of economic growth. And that new model was to force march the economy up the value-added chain, out of sort of, away from investing in infrastructure and housing, away from low-end textile manufacturing, and into industries that required a greater degree of technology. Because when they look around and they see developed economies, that's what they look like. They're high-end manufacturing industries. And so that was the vision. That is how they will change the Chinese economy. But the way that they've decided to do that is by targeting a whole lot of high-end industries such as semiconductors, electric vehicles, robotics, and by achieving sort of either a degree of dominance or building up those industries using things like subsidies and non-tariff barriers and quotas and state funds to buy foreign technology.